Hello and welcome to the Womb-Centered Healing Podcast. I'm Sama Morningstar, and I have Rafael with me here today. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. And you are one of the wonderful guests on the Embodied Shakti Summit as well. So I truly enjoyed our interview for the summit, and I'm looking forward to this conversation to deepen our discussion and particularly focus in on the womb-centered healing aspect of embodied Shakti practices, of the embodied Shakti practices that we discussed. And I know that you're a doula and you work in a lot of different realms, and I would love for you to introduce yourself and share about your work and share about what womb-centered healing means to you, both personally and professionally and socially and spiritually and all the different ways it has meaning for you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sama. This has been an incredible ride with you, truly. And I'm Rafael. I am a doula, priestess, and healer. That's the fast way to talk about it. Womb-centered healing, my goodness. So what it means to me personally, or what it has been for me personally, is healing around the womb that I was born from. So you don't have to know me long to know that my mom and I have had clashes, really even starting from birth. Like my birth story is pretty intense. And I had to kind of cobble together my own personal healing, but my healing with her. And that has set a foundation for healing from top to bottom. And where I got to start was having an experienced doula remind me that we female folks spent time in our grandmothers because you're born with all your eggs. So,
male folks spent time in their grandmothers.
Yep. And the only difference is
we all did. Everyone did. Male, female, all genders. We all spent time inside our grandmothers and our mother's womb. 2 wombs.
Yep. So takes 2 to get us here. So, I started with that relationship. I started asking questions about kind of what was the dynamic between my mother and her mother, and kind of finding out what my grandmother was like. And it created some really great healing space for me. And I've also been really blessed that, generally speaking, I haven't had many issues with my own womb or reproductive system. And so it's given me a different kind of space to create healing with others, right? And in my own story of asking myself, how has this happened? Because it's not like trauma hasn't found me. It's just for some reason that's not where it settles in my body. And so I continue to have that conversation with my own womb as you carry very differently, and I appreciate that. And what is it? And how can I use that information to continue to heal myself and also be with others who are wherever they are in their own journey around wombs?
I'm really curious about that. And I want to let you carry on if there were other essential aspects to the story you wanted to tell, but I'm really curious what you've discovered, because I have a similar experience where what my womb holds and how my womb holds things is very mild compared to what I see go on for a lot of women. And it's not that my story is more mild. My backstory, the trauma from early childhood, the trauma down the generations that we start to work with when we're working with women who struggle with, more severe womb ailments than I have, or maybe that you have. And and for me, it settles somewhere else in my body, in my throat, which is very much connected to, you know, and other areas too, just overall structural. And so I've come to some discoveries about how the whole body is involved in protecting the womb. And just in what you were sharing, it was bringing up some reflections to me about maybe perhaps some wisdom that I remembered and implemented or encountered along the way, and implemented in such a way that that sort of short-circuited some of the ways that it's been traditional to carry things in the womb. But typically in my family, it's not been carried in the womb, it's been carried in the throat. And so I've even short-circuiting that as well. Here I am, you know, in the family that keeps everything secret, proclaiming everything about the unspeakable things like menstruation and, you know, out to the world on podcasts and everything, right? So I'm really breaking that pattern. So I'm curious what you've discovered in that. Like, wow, thank you, womb, for holding things different. But where does your body hold that, you know, where has it focused in on your body, and what have you discovered?
Gotcha. So I feel like, just for one, that's just how my body is oriented. Everybody's got their something. So to answer your question, a lot of my wounds like to hang out in my throat as well, in my nervous system, and across, kind of similar to what you said, across the structure of my body. And I know people who that's true for them, and their reproductive system is doing all kinds of things. And in my family, the range is huge, right? Like there's people who are similar to me and don't really have much going on, all the way to, you know, my aunt used to have to go to the hospital on a regular basis for blood transfusions because she bled so heavily. And she had a home birth, had my cousin in her toilet at home with the midwife, you know, like, so it just varies. And I feel like one of the things that I've discovered about trauma and about healing is that everything counts, negatively and positively. So for me, those little, well, they're not so little when you add it into the scheme of things, but those moments where my mom wasn't being traumatizing counted. And one of the places was my body was to look a certain way and be a certain way. And yes, I have the story too of having to hide menstruating and no one should know, and being afraid of getting pregnant and all that stuff. But my mom was like, this is just a normal part of how your body functions. Also, my mom's body was not, I had access to my mother's entire body all the time. I could get as many hugs as I wanted. I could, you know, we smelled on each other. We were in each other's hair. I was an only child to a single parent. So, you know, we walk around the house naked trying to get to things. She wasn't hiding herself, right? And when we both were on our periods, we complained together, you know, and it was like, oh God, our trash is going to be horrible, right? So all that stuff counted for me. And one more example I'm thinking of is also, my mom was like, sex is great, you're gonna love it, right? So there's all those things counted, along with the other pieces of, no, make sure you don't bleed through, and don't talk to anybody about it, and you're smelly and you're gross and you're this and you're that. And so I think that's one of the reasons why I don't hold there is, you know, I got some early messaging that part of me wasn't absolutely atrocious.
That's a lot. That's a lot right there. I mean,
that's a lot.
That, you know, so many women, and you know, from my background, where there was a lot of hiding of the body. I still remember I had an aunt, a younger sister of my father, who lived with us, and she was going to UC San Francisco at the time, studying music. And so she was an adult but young woman living with us. And I remember my father going off on her at one point because she left a blood clot in the shower. You know, and so there was just and that's all I knew, because it was all hidden. I was taught how to wrap my pads in toilet paper before putting them in the trash so that he wouldn't see the blood. He wouldn't see the color of the blood on, I was taught to completely keep everything hidden and not talked about either. And so that the difference of what you described of having it be an open discussion and, everything out in the open in your upbringing as a young woman when you still lived at home is huge. That's such a huge difference for so many women, because I know I'm not alone in that. And for my mother, where it was such a deeply held secret that she thought she was dying when she first got her menstruation.
Yep.
At 10 years old, and still didn't even get enough information to know that she could get pregnant when she started fooling around with her boyfriend. And that's how I'm here, right? So there we go. There's the blessing of that. But she had to keep me a secret for most of her pregnancy until it was too late to be taken to Mexico for an illegal abortion, which she was certain that her mother was going to do if she found out. So this whole secrecy thing is really interwoven, and the fact that it was so open, that's a huge gift.
It is. And also how my mom grew up, she grew up poor in the deep South. So for many rural people, and I'm not going to say this for everybody, but at least for my family, a lot of things didn't go hidden. There are some things that were, but there were 14 children, 2 parents in one household. There's only so much hiding you can do.
There's only
right. And that bled into how my mother parented. But also, I think what has also allowed things not to settle is I started my healing path really early. So I became a sex educator when I was 15 years old.
There we go.
And by the time I was in college, I was taking more classes and teaching again. And at one point became a teacher's assistant for the brand new human sexuality program when it was San Francisco State. So, and I also, but what I want to add to that is that's because I got to stand on the shoulders of all those people who came before me who pushed really hard to make sure that sex education was okay. And some of that is owed to all the people who fought really hard in the AIDS epidemic. That's also second wave feminism. That's Black granny midwives, like everybody who took those steps so that I could become a sex educator at 15 and be a part of human sexuality program by the time I got to college. That was also present. And I took a hold of those opportunities. And I was like, I want this. I want to be even better. And the fact that I got to start doing that at a younger age and I kept going has also played into how things are today, now that I'm 37 and I pretty much don't have any issues, right? And I keep creating opportunities for myself and showing up in places that have already been created for me that allow me to heal. And that is such an important piece that I want folks who are doing healing of any sort, but particularly around your womb, to understand is that everything counts, and wherever there's opportunity for healing, take it. And that may just be drinking more water every day, all the way to some of the big things I got because I grew up in California, of like going to women's retreats and having Mayan womb massage and learning about steaming and reading the book Cunt and all kinds of pieces that I've cobbled together. And it's continued these initial seeds that were planted. And I was also able to uproot things that I didn't need anymore.
Beautiful. Yeah, it sounds very similar to my process too, because we can really feel uplifted by the women that came before that struggled so hard to create new opportunities and to put these topics of sexuality and the detrimental effects of not educating the young people about sexuality. Boy, that by itself, we could do a whole podcast just on that. And this has been and maybe we will today, because this has been a big passion of mine. And there's a little bit of a difficulty because, I live in a rural town, and if I waltzed into the high school there and said, I want to do some sex ed courses, will you pay me to do so? And, well, what's your background? Oh, Tantra and, and, well, I have a degree in psychology, so I could make a case for myself.
Right.
But first of all, they're not hiring teachers just for that.
True.
It has to come through state-funded programs. And the state-funded programs have their specific curriculum that has to be like approved so everybody's behind is covered, right? And so, and I know because when I was a teenager, my mom was in her born-again Christian phase, and she wanted to review there was a whole thing with the sex ed education that was going on at that time, that the parents got to review the material and remove their children from that class if it disagreed with their religious beliefs. And that's what my mom did. She actually pulled me out of class on the days when they were going to do sex ed, because she felt that the science-based, biology-based approach to sexuality was, giving me too much information and would make me somehow promiscuous and all of that. Well, her plan backfired, of course, to keep it secret from me, especially since I don't have to go into all those details, but the truth is, I knew from the experience of being a child of a teenage pregnancy that not knowing about fertility is what produced me. And then she was going to try and repeat that, that this whole thing of that you shouldn't know about your fertility or that it's somehow sinful, that was just perpetuating the same system. I was determined to not end up in the same shoes as my mom. And so we know the detriment of it, and yet there's all of these influences where a lot, like especially in rural California, there's a lot of cultural belief systems in the population that doesn't want to talk about sex and sees still sex as something sinful and shameful. And therefore, even talking about it biologically is not okay, And so there's all of this resistance to actually talking about it. So I'm curious what programs you were involved in and how you would advise me, say, if I wanted to somehow form a bridge between the kind of work that I'm doing and make it available to young people who might really be feeling dissatisfied, just as I was, with the restrictions that their parents want to put on, what they can learn about, and maybe suffering the consequences. I'm looking to start a nonprofit to support, teenage pregnant women in my community, and doing some initial research about that. And it's a thing everywhere. I mean, there's whole programs where people, state-funded programs for the aftermath of having inadequate education on this. So I'm really curious to hear your perspective on all of this and how we can move forward. It sounds like you were in more urban areas where there were a lot more progressive programs and things like that. But how do you see those programs spreading into more rural areas where there's possibly less systematic awareness or progressiveness available?
Right. So I'm a product of place and time. So I grew up in San Jose in the 80s and lived there until about 2001. So I was smack dab in the middle of the dot-com boom.
Mm-hmm.
And San Jose used to be rural. A lot of people don't know that. Yeah. But by the time I came into it, it was shifting to what it is now. And all the, like, I miss the orchards and all that good stuff. But a part of what was happening at the time was this kind of convergence of money, progression, and curiosity. And it all kind of got stirred. And so everyone was willing to try something new and something different to see what would happen. And so, like, conflict mediation as a tool for young people was brand new. And I just so happened to hit junior high when that was becoming a thing. And I just so happened to hit high school when they started being like, maybe young people should be teaching sex education in schools and not the teachers.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's just, it literally has just been like, oh, right place, right time. And then I took it. And when I have talked to people who weren't in those kinds of like place and time luckiness, because along the way, I have encountered people who live in rural places or don't have a lot of money or don't have a lot of time or whatever the issue is. And the first thing I've learned from them is don't recreate the wheel. Like, there's so many, this has been an issue for a really long time. And folks have done things that has been successful, and folks have not been successful. And it's our job to learn from both of those things to create something new, which leads into, we have to be creative. If change is not going to come to us, but progression is about going up against conservatism, however it shows up, because it's not just a political ideology. It's, can be, my partner is conservative about money. I'm progressive. I love to spend it, right? Like, whenever those two things are trying to come together, it's to be a part of evolution. And I'm of the mind that the folks who are more progressive in our thinking tend to be the most creative and the most afraid to be creative. And it's like, why not just say to a couple of your friends, hey, I know your son or your daughter is about to be 13. Do you want me to help you with the whole sex education talk? Like, it doesn't have to be us going into schools. It can, a lot of this stuff started just in people's houses.
Right. Yeah. And that's starting for me.
Right. It's all like, what's your intention? Right. And what's the level of impact that we want to have? But it can be just, pulling aside a niece, which I have done, a niece or a nephew. I have one specific story that I'll say in a second, but I've pulled both aside and been like, let me just give you this little tidbit. And they've gotten older and come back to me and been like, I remembered that. And I was like, really? But one story is not too long ago, young woman, I'm basically her godmother, and she ended up bleeding through her dress and was super embarrassed and was like, I came into the bathroom just as like, she and two other girls are like freaking out, trying to figure out what to do because we're at a party. And she was like, oh, I sat in chocolate. Oh my God. And I was like, I know what that is. It's fine. I was like, let me show you how to deal with this because I've been there. And just even that moment where I got to be with these young women and everyone started to calm down and be like, well, maybe this isn't such a big deal. And the two other girls stopped making jokes and they started paying attention like, wait, how do you get a blood stain out when you don't have all the tools and you're just at a party? Let me watch and see what she's doing, right? So it can be moments that small all the way to, like you're saying, like creating a nonprofit and figuring out a way to change legislation and really creating a platform and a space, a safe space for these kinds of conversations to happen. But all of it counts.
Yeah.
And we're definitely going to have to be super creative as we continue to move this forward. Because yes, like San Jose got to be at the forefront along with San Francisco and things like that. But what's the point if we're not moving into all the areas of just this country, much less the world.
Right. And I mean, I got to study at UC Davis, which is very rural, and yet it's in the UC system. And we had a wonderful women's studies department. And I studied with some of the leaders, serious thought leaders, Inez Hernandez, and I forget some of the other names. She's the one that sticks with me the most. But I really got educated in all of this. And then I go out in my world, and I'm, part of a very small minority of people that are, got educated how to think in these ways and see through the veil of, the consensual reality that most people still just take for granted. So it was in the right place at the right time, and combine that with psychology and all this. And now it's like I'm on a mission, right, in rural America. And, I've wanted to go move to another town that I know is more progressive. And the opportunities keep saying, no, you're not supposed to be in that town. I'm like, oh, come on. It would be so much easier to start my women's groups there and to there's going to be, but you know what? In that town, there's already 30 women doing women's groups and ceremonies for the girls' menarche and all this stuff. And I'd just be another voice in the crowd. Whereas here, I'm the lady. Anyone locally who wants to, and there are, people starting to pop up. There's this woman who's organizing a whole local women's group, and she's got 20 women coming every week. And she's having me come in and do a series of workshops around herbal wisdom. I'm just doing the basics, chamomile, nettles, ginger, mugwort, and what was the last one? One other herb that every woman needs to have in her home for basic self-care and care for the family, right? So that's it. And I get to start with the very simple things, and that's how I'll build my community and connection with the folks in the community. So I'm taking notes on the podcast here, and so thank you for sharing your insights on that. And so, is there anything else that was sort of next for you in sharing about the womb-centered healing journey? I know that we got sort of off on some topics based on your personal journey, and you didn't stop at being a sex educator at 15. You eventually became a doula, and now you do spiritual guidance for people. I'm imagining that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm imagining some of your spiritual guidance work that you do with people addresses ancestral healing or generational healing. And that, I feel, is a very womb-centered practice, because the womb is what connects us. As we were saying, we were all in our grandmother's womb. So I'd love to hear more about your journey as a womb-centered healing practitioner.
Yeah, so I became and stayed, I still continue to do sex education work. So it's something that is beloved. And I became a doula after doing lots of queer youth nonprofit work. And it just kind of came to me. Like, I just was like, I want to work with women and babies, and I don't want to be an OB. So what's possible? And this showed up. And oh my goodness. I think in my work as a doula, so up until now, it has been centered around women who are having their babies, and I'm moving in slowly into working more with partners, and especially fathers and folks who are in same-sex relationships. And I've even started working with female to male trans folks who are having babies. So it's that notion is expanding in ways that I really find beautiful and amazing. And like you said, the womb connects us all. There's no one who is going to escape that understanding and that origin story. So I think understanding the womb as truly a place of mystery, because you ever get to see, I finally got to see a picture of what the uterus looks like when it's just its regular self, and it's only like this big. It's really small. And this thing can stretch to hold upwards of a 15-pound person. This thing can squeeze and contract hard enough to assist you in getting that person out into the world. This thing can ensure that, be precise enough to get the endometrium off the lining of itself out of your body. It is basically soil for the creation of life, and it's not that big. And something that the womb has taught me and birth has taught me spiritually is that God lives in the subtle, and it doesn't always have to be ginormous. Sometimes it needs to get bigger to do bigger things, but don't discount everything that's small, and being precise and being able to shed some lining and hold a whole human being. We need to be able to have that as a range of our capacities as human beings, and to be able to hold complexity, because the womb is just, it don't get no more complex than that, except for maybe the nervous system, right? Like it's just,
and it's interwoven with the nervous system and all the other systems of the body,
right? With everything, and like just the simple knowledge that your womb is attached to your bladder. They are attached. Most people do not know that.
I didn't know that.
So, and how that plays into what happens around incontinence, and how important your pelvic floor is. And when you have a surgical delivery, what happens to your bladder before, during, and after. And all the things that you can learn just from that one organ that you got created in, that you grew in, your first house. So the womb being your first home, and just really understanding that the deep mystery of who we are lives there. And I feel like so much of the ills of our world and of our culture can really be solved if we focus in on the people who are going to be giving birth to the next generation. And I know that it's also because, I'm a doula, so that's my focus. And so
you have your doula perspective, which I happen to agree with, and that's why we're on this podcast, because doulas is where it's at. Moms is where it's at.
Biased, birth has taught me that when you create an environment for mothers, for birthing people, that is conducive to them being healthy and happy and giving birth in a really loving, compassionate, safe way, you pretty much get rid of all the issues. Because if that mother has a place to live, something to eat that's nutritious, has enough money in the bank to take care of their bills and all of their needs, if their environment that they're in is safe, right? They're not worried about being beaten or sexually assaulted or anything like that. When you take care of all those things, think about the world that it has to be in order for that child to have a particular kind of entry into the world. And we start preparing for this world when we're in the womb. It's our mother's body and how she's reacting to things and what's going in and what's coming out that tells us what the world is going to be like. And there's research done that all the way down to our DNA will change according to what we think the world is going to be like when we get here. Mm-hmm. So why not stop and say, okay, we got to make sure the environment for who is pregnant is on point. We got to make sure that that first home has what it needs, mm-hmm. so that anything will thrive in it. Mm-hmm. And even if hard times come, you can have more space for resiliency. Mm-hmm. So, I feel like if we can really take patriarchy away as a focus, mm-hmm. and not center masculinity and really ask ourselves and really sit in the question of what will we need to do to heal the womb? We'll be able to do some great work.
Yeah. And I feel to really activate the power of the womb to regenerate life. And I think that changes in the overarching social structure will just, and we're returning to partnership, and masculinity is maturing and evolving into something that is no longer trying to dominate the feminine. I'm hoping it's, that energy is sort of, it gets to the point where it gets too big and it can't get any bigger without the whole system collapsing. It's like the yin and the yang symbol, how it's a moving thing, right? And so there's a partnership that needs to be reestablished in so many people. I mean, we just need to be in partnership. And so that is, I feel, a very womb-centered way of being. Our wombs are the first relationship that we have with lovers, with children, with mothers, with fathers. I mean, that's the first relationship, and it guides our relationship. But, we could go on and on all afternoon. And I just want to wrap up by saying that, and you spoke to it quite a bit too, we so think alike as doulas and spiritual, the marriage between the biology and spirit is what we work with as doulas, as helping birthing moms, because that's a spirit. I always like to say a spirit is coming in and taking physical form in the womb and being birthed into the world as a new baby. But that can also happen through an inspiration that we are being called to create. It still happens through the womb, that spirit inspiration takes physical form and is born. And we both have that awareness as doulas, that we can doula people through a spiritual rebirth as well. And that approach to spirituality is an embodied approach where we're seeing the body as the place to be, and physical embodiment on this planet is where we're supposed to be, instead of something that's considered sinful or shameful coming through a womb. We're seeing it as this incredible sacred blessing of being given this gift of a human life, and that embodiment and doing whatever we need to arrange our environment, and arrange our society and arrange our reality and create a reality that's conducive to healthy human life, so that we can fully be embodied as spirits in healthy vessels, right? On this planet. That practice is what we're calling embodied Shakti, and we spoke quite a bit about it in the Embodied Shakti Summit in your interview. And so I just wanted to invite listeners, if you're enjoying hearing our reflections together, to join the Embodied Shakti Summit by going to embodiedshaktisummit.com. And Shakti is spelled Shakti. And you can hear interviews with Rafael and other speakers from around the world who are speaking along these lines and joining in the conversation. It's a really amazing lineup of practitioners, and so I highly recommend joining us. And so is there anything you want to say about that to wrap up, or any last intentions or words of wisdom?
Yes, just that healing is not a luxury. It's a basic necessity.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're talking about really at the end of the day is healing ourselves and turning that not from it's a spa day, but that this is something that's as essential as brushing your teeth every day.
Mm. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And I would add that that's each of our individual responsibility, because ultimately we are the ones that have to discover that place of inner guidance that will carry us through the entire path and know at each moment what step we need to take, and that we can have guides and helpers along the way, like myself or Rafael or other spiritual midwives or doulas, if you will. And ultimately, we each have to take responsibility for all of our own choices and our healing processes along the way.
True.
Here we are. All right. Well, so if someone wanted to get in touch with you, and well, you can always sign up for the summit and find out your contact information. But do you have a more direct way to share with folks?
Yes. So going to my website, cypressdoula.com, it's cypress like the tree, is a great direct way. But I also encourage everyone to go to the summit and check me out. Check out the summit. It's amazing. And that's also a way to get in contact with me.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much. And that's all for now. Until next time.
Mwah. Have a great one.
You too. Thank you.